This section of the unit that we just finished was osmosis and diffusion, and it's part of what we call cell processes, things that take place in cells. And so we have two more left to talk about. We already talked about osmosis and diffusion. The last two are two chemical reactions that happen in different living things, and they're called photosynthesis and respiration. So you guys have a basic idea about what photosynthesis is, because in your question today you said it's how plants make food. So how are plants different from animals, for example? Frank?
Like move or like, see?
They don't really move, okay. How about in terms of their nutrition? Sophia?
Because, like, plants won't eat, like, animals will eat, like, specific kind of food.
Yeah, plants don't have to eat anything. Okay? Although we know all living things need energy, that's why we eat things, but plants don't eat anything. But they still do need energy. They need a source of energy. And so the way that they're able to do that is through this process that we call photosynthesis. Okay. Photo means light. Synthesis means to build up something. So this is building up something, making something using light energy. And it's a chemical process that happens. Okay? And we're going to learn the chemical equation for that, about what molecules are involved and how they are rearranged to form different molecules. So first off, you know photosynthesis happens, you already told me, in plants. Where inside of a plant cell does photosynthesis take place? What organelle? Ready?
Like the leaves.
Well, it happens in the leaves, but the leaves have lots of these organelles. We talked about cells and plant cells. Lily? Chloroplast. That's where this happens. Remember, in the green cells of plants, there are these oval-shaped organelles that are green. They have a pigment called chlorophyll in them, and that's where this takes place. You already told me, what does it mean? So in order for a plant to go through this process of photosynthesis, Bailey, you said something in your question today. It needs what? It needs light. It needs a source of energy. And that source of energy is the sun, is light. And when we're writing out this chemical reaction here, we write the light is, technically, light should not be part of a chemical reaction because it's not a molecule. It's a type of energy, but we're going to leave it here for our purposes. So it needs light. Now, in nature, obviously, it's sunlight, but plants can grow in artificial light as well, but they need light. That's where the energy for this process comes from. And then they need two other things, two molecules, two compounds, in order for photosynthesis to be able to happen. What is one of them, Bailey?
Water.
Water. And the other one? Really? Carbon dioxide. Those are the two compounds that plants need for photosynthesis. Where do they get the water? Where do plants get water, Sophia?
From, like, roots.
Yeah, and how does it get into the plant?
From the roots.
From the roots. So as water goes into the soil, the roots of plants are able to absorb that water and move it up to the leaves. Where do plants get carbon dioxide from? Okay? Sort of, but where is it? It's in the atmosphere, it's in the air. It's actually a pretty small percent of the atmosphere, but it is in the atmosphere. And so plants can absorb carbon dioxide through their leaves. And that's how they get these things. So they get light from the sun, water from the soil, carbon dioxide from the air, and then a chemical reaction happens. And the different atoms that make up those things sort of get rearranged to form new stuff. Okay? Forms two things. Now, in the question that you guys told me is how plants make what? Food. But we're going to get more specific now. We're not really going to say it's how plants make their own food, because they don't make, veggie burgers and fries and slices of pizza for themselves. They just make one simple thing, a type of sugar. And the sugar it's glucose. Okay, so the sugar they make is called glucose. It has a chemical formula. Just like water is H2O. Carbon dioxide is CO2. Glucose is C6H12O6. That is the chemical formula for glucose. What do those numbers mean? So do you know what the numbers, when we say H2O, what does the 2 mean? Sophia?
Well, I know it's like part of the periodic, or the
Hydrogen's an element in the periodic table, correct? So he says H2. What does the 2 mean?
It's I don't know.
Right?
I think it's like number of molecules.
Close. We're going to say it's the number of atoms. So in a water molecule, a little piece of water, there's 2 hydrogen atoms bonded or connected to what's left. What else is in water? Oxygen. Now there's no number after the oxygen. Does that mean there's none? It means there's 1. So that's what water is. It's 2 hydrogen atoms bonded to 1 oxygen atom. So glucose is 6 what?
6
Carbon,
12
12 hydrogen, 6 oxygen. All connected into obviously a bigger molecule than water because there's more atoms there. So that's what those numbers mean. And that's glucose. Glucose is a sugar. Glucose contains energy in it. If you eat a piece of bread in your lunch, starch in that bread is going to be digested into glucose. That glucose is going to go into your blood, and that's going to supply all of your cells with energy. So plants don't have to eat things because they make glucose for themselves. So from now on, photosynthesis, we're not going to say produces food for the plant. We're going to say it produces glucose. That's their food. And it produces one waste product. So it produces glucose. That's what the plants need. And then there's one thing left over. Bailey?
Oxygen?
Yeah, they produce oxygen, O2. So this is what we call the equation of photosynthesis. It tells you, okay, if there's light available in carbon dioxide and water, then a plant will produce glucose and oxygen. You'll also notice that the atoms that are present here in glucose, they are all over here as well. We have carbon, we have oxygen, we have hydrogen, all the same things we have over here. We're just rearranging the configuration of those atoms. That's what a chemical reaction is, rearranging the atoms. Now, the things in a chemical reaction, the things on the left side of the arrow, we call those the reactants. Those are the things that are reacting with each other. And on the opposite side, after the arrow, is what we call the products, what is produced by this chemical reaction. Sophia?
So if it's a CO2, does that mean that there's 2 both of them?
Nope. The 2 only goes with what's before it. So there's 1 carbon and 2 oxygens together to form a carbon dioxide. So the goal of photosynthesis is to produce food, or as we now will say, to produce glucose for the plant. Why can't we go through photosynthesis? Why can't we just go lay in the sun and then we wouldn't be hungry anymore? Why are we unable to do that? Okay?
Because we have like different like cells that if we outside if we get hot and then
Okay.
well depending if the sun's out, but
All right, you start off closer in the cells. Faith? We don't chloroplast in our cells. Our cells don't have those green organelles that plant cells do in their leaves and their stems. And those chloroplasts is where this happens. If we don't have chloroplasts in our cells, we can't do this. We can't make our own glucose. Excuse me? That's all you can't really say they eat it. It's all they use is glucose. But really, glucose is the main thing we use as well. Even if you eat lots of other stuff, it eventually mostly gets digested into you. All right, and then, so that happens in plants and a few other things. Protists and some bacteria, not in animals though, photosynthesis. We have to eat things to get glucose. The next step is another chemical reaction that takes place. But this one happens not just in plants, but really in all living things. It's called respiration or cellular respiration. And you're going to have to memorize this equation as well. But the good news is, if you know photosynthesis, respiration is very easy. Can you guess why? It's easy to remember respiration if you know photosynthesis. Bailey? Yeah, it's almost the exact opposite. So in telling you that, what do you think in respiration we start with? What are our reactants? I'll have some new hands here. I keep calling the same four girls. What do you think we start with here? No. Yes. Yeah, one thing is oxygen. It's going to be here. What about there? What else do we start with? Avril? Yeah, it starts with glucose and oxygen. Because it's the opposite. So if we have glucose and we have oxygen, again, a chemical reaction happens. It's a bunch of enzymes. And the atoms of glucose and oxygen get all rearranged. And it forms three things. Who could tell me what you think one of those things might be? Rania? Carbon dioxide. How about another thing? Vinny? Water. And now this one you're not going to get. But you could come up with a sort of idea about what it might be.
Oh,
Sophia?
what's the thing? Wait, never mind.
Okay. Lily?
Like maybe some of the nutrients that
Not quite.
like the soil that's
No. So this happens in our cells.
Oh,
Why did I put light in this little...
because that's what they need. Oh, wait. Does it create music?
No. Light is a type of what?
Energy.
Yes. And this is a molecule that can store energy. You won't get it. It's called ATP. Stands for adenosine triphosphate.
What?
Adenosine triphosphate. No. So ATP, you don't need to know what it means. But what you do need to know is ATP is what our cells use for energy. Okay? So this happens in the mitochondria. So in the mitochondria, glucose goes in and oxygen, and ATP is formed, and then there's two waste products. What are the waste products that are formed after respiration? Raise your hand, please. After respiration, what do we end up with? It's one thing. Brendan? Water, and the other thing? Anya? Yes. Those are waste products. So again, it's the opposite. So this ATP is very important. Just like in your house, what gives your iPod and your Xbox and your straightening iron and your stove the energy they need? Electricity, right? That's what everything kind of runs on. Where can that electricity come from, ultimately? Solar panels can provide that electricity, or
The
wind turbines can provide electricity. What else? Hydropower, burning coal. So there's lots of, those are all sources of energy. But they all get transformed in some way into electricity because that's what your items run on. They all run on electricity. Well, in a cell, in a living thing, everything doesn't run on electricity. It runs on this molecule called ATP. So if your cells don't have ATP, they will die. This is why if you lose oxygen, if you lose blood flow to a certain area, that part of your body can die. That's why if you choke and you can't breathe in and get oxygen to your body, you can die. Okay? It's because you need a constant source of ATP for all of your cells. If you take away that oxygen, your body can't make, your cells can't make ATP, and you can't survive. Like Lily said, this process, this chemical reaction happens in what organelle?
The
Mitochondria. And as we know from when we studied cells, basically all cells have mitochondria. Plant cells, animal cells, bacteria cells. Okay, so which kind of living things go through photosynthesis? Plants. What goes through respiration? This is where we're careful.
Animals and plants.
Because people always want to say, well, photosynthesis happens in plants, respiration happens in everything. So don't say plants and then say animals. It's plants and everything, including plants. Again, we have the reactants on the left side and the products on the right side. Hold on, I'll answer your question in 1 second. Let me finish this. And so what would you say is the ultimate goal of respiration? So the goal of photosynthesis was to produce glucose. What's the goal of respiration, Brendan? To make energy, to make ATP. Okay, Sophia, what was your question?
But like, so it's different because it like so in the photosynthesis, why wouldn't they be the same? Like, why would glucose and oxygen both be toxic?
Why wouldn't they be what?
Because they like.
Because they combine on this side and get rearranged. So the reactants are the molecules that get rearranged into new stuff. So in respiration, these glucose atoms get rearranged to form new things. Water, carbon dioxide, and the energy goes to make ATP.
So what's that other part of energy where it like goes from down in the earth? Like
Geothermal?
yeah.
That's another way of producing energy, yeah. All right.